All right, we are going to continue with this video about statistics. We're looking at chapter 12 and looking at section 3, measures of dispersion. We're going to talk a little bit more about using it for looking at the mean and standard deviation for grouped frequency distributions. So remember in module 12.2b we talked about, in that video we talked about frequency distributions and looking at groups of information and groups of data. The last video we talked about standard deviation, and so now we're going to combine those and look at standard deviation for a large group of data. And it's not going to be too much different than what we looked at before. We're just taking, and now we're going to, since we're using classes, remember we had classes to where information was grouped by 10 to 19 and 20 to 29 if we were taking measures of, I'm trying to remember, it was hours for the amount of time that students were working on projects. So that was these were our classes that we had grouped those in because we were working with large data sets. Well, now we're going to do the same thing, except for our classes. We're going to find the midpoint of the class to be able to use it to find standard deviation of a group. And that class midpoint we're going to call big M, so capital M again, and we're going to look at our frequencies and we're going to call that F, and so capital F. And we're going to continue with using the information from the last video looking at x minus x bar, except for in this case we're going to use M midpoint minus x bar, and remember x bar is the mean. And so much like being able to find the standard deviation of data sets, to be able to find it for a frequency distribution, we're going to need to make sure that we get the mean first, and then we're going to square the difference, and then we're going to use that to plug into the square root and make sure we divide it by n minus 1. So let's go ahead then and look at a problem. Again, this is very similar to what we did before. And so here's a frequency distribution. Rather than individual data points, it's in classes. And so this is having to do with machined holes. And so there's 56 different pieces of data. And they've already made the frequency distribution over here for you. So normally, remember, this would be 56 different numbers that they would give to you, and you would need to make tally marks in here to be able to get this frequency distribution, but they've done that for you already. And so what we're going to do now is let's go ahead and use this frequency distribution to be able to say, okay, we're going to need to find the midpoint of these numbers up here. So the midpoint between 0.360 and 0.364 is 0.362. So you can see it down here. Midpoint between 0.365 and 0.369 is 0.367. So you can see it down here. So all that they've done, and actually they do have this column over here for you to see. So they've taken the midpoint of these numbers right here and they've written them right here. Well, they've also brought and transposed the frequencies of the data over here also. So now, again, now it's just kind of plug and chug. You're going to take the frequency times the midpoint, which gives you the frequency times midpoint right here, F times M. 4 times 0.362 gives you 1.448. And you go ahead and fill this column in. Once you have that column filled in, then you can take your midpoint, and you're going to need to be able to subtract it, or you're going to take and subtract the mean from your midpoint. So to be able to find the mean, what you'll do is you will get the sum of f times n and divide it by n. So remember, it's just you're finding the mean. So now basically you've gone from this frequency distribution over here till you're going to use this set of data right here to be able to find a mean. So this is just adding the numbers up and then dividing them by the number of numbers. And so you go, okay, all of these numbers added up, and they divide, you divide it by 56, and you get 0.3745 is about the mean of all the numbers that you were given that were in this huge set of numbers over here. So now that you have the mean, go ahead and go back to plug and chug. You're going to fill in the last three columns because you know your midpoint. Your midpoint's over here, 0.362. You've been able to determine your mean, 0.3745, and so you'll subtract that mean from the midpoint, and you end up getting 0.0125. And you just fill this column in here. Now remember, you've got positives and negative numbers, so you want to square that. And then once you have that number squared, this is the number that you're going to be able to work with because they're all positive numbers. And you're going to take these numbers here and you're going to multiply them back towards the frequency. And so just look at what it says up here, and it's going to tell you what the next step is to do. So after you get the mean minus the midpoint. The next thing on here, it says you're going to square that. So you're going to square it. Then the next thing over here that says that you're going to multiply the frequency times this number right here. So after you do that, you get this set of numbers right here. And with this set of numbers, 0.026, you'll be able to then go back and work to find the standard deviation of the frequency because now you plug this number into your formula here. Sum of f times m minus the mean squared, or frequency times midpoint minus mean squared, over n minus 1. And n minus 1 is, here's n, 56 minus 1 is 55, and you end up with this number right here after you take the square root. And so this number right here is going to be your standard deviation to the mean that you got right here that describes the average of the data that you were given right here. Okay.